Welcome to First Parish in Needham, a Unitarian Universalist congregation founded in 1711 along with the town of Needham. We are a proud LGBTQ welcoming congregation, climate justice seeking green sanctuary, and level 2 sanctuary supporting congregation for immigration justice. Whoever you are, whatever your background, and wherever you're watching from, you are welcome here. I am Gail Lehman. I'm a member of the choir, pastoral care team, and ministerial intern committee. The First Parish community has been a blessing to me, especially this past year. As you know, what's happening right now at the congregation is different than usual because of the COVID pandemic. Although our building is closed, our faith community is open. We hope all of you will plug into our Zoom gathering opportunities throughout the week, including Zoom Social Hour after every Sunday service. You can learn more about all that's happening at First Parish by going to our website, uuneedham.org, or by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. To get the Zoom links, please sign up for our weekly email newsletter by going to our website and clicking Get Involved Newsletter, or sending your request to office@uuneedham.org. Our sincere hope is that these online services and connection opportunities will help us keep the physical distance required during the pandemic without losing much of the spiritual, emotional, and social closeness that we treasure in our faith community. If you're watching this service as it live streams, please take a moment now to say hello and introduce yourself in the YouTube chat box. Welcome again to everyone, and good morning.
We light our chalice today with words from Jewish American author and activist Marge Percy. This is her poem, The Low Road. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up, they can bust you, they can break your fingers, they can burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone, you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. But two people fighting, back to back, can cut through a mob. A snake-dancing file can break a cordon, an army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration, 100 fill a hall, 1,000 have solidarity in your own newsletter, 10,000 power and your own paper, 100,000 your own media, 10 million your own country. It goes one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more. Hymn 153, Oh, I Woke Up This Morning, was an African-American slave spiritual composed in community before the Civil War. Our updated lyrics come from pastor and freedom rider Reverend Osby, who rewrote lyrics of an old slave spiritual song to become a protest song while jailed in Mississippi for riding on an integrated bus. In our hymnal, the tune is named after 19th century Black Unitarian author, reformer, and lecturer, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Please join us in singing from home hymn number 153, Oh, I Woke Up This Morning.
Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I was walking and talking with my mind set on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind set on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I was singing and praying with my mind set on freedom. Singing and praying with my mind set on on freedom, singing and praying with my mind. Stay on freedom, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the covenant is a set of promises the membership of a congregation strives to honor with one another and out in the world. Though we cannot gather in person during this time, we strive to live these promises every day. Please say along with me from home the words of our parish covenant as shown on your screen. We gather as a loving community to encourage and comfort one another. We gather as a diverse community to support each other in our search for spiritual truth. We gather as a service community to live our beliefs through action and care for our world.
Good morning. Lots has been happening in our country this week, this month, and it feels like a perfect time for our emotional resiliency plush pals to come help us honor our Unitarian Universalist fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. Wait, what? What does that even mean? I often jump to the kids' language to start to understand our principles. One version is that we believe that all persons should have a vote about the things that concern them. And another is believe in your ideals and voice your vote. I like this. All people should have a vote and be able to speak up about what is important to them. But what if what some people want is different from what we want? If we pay attention to the news or even the conversations happening in our extended families, we know that this happens a lot. What do we do to ensure that each person has a voice? What do we do to make sure that our own voice is heard and respected? What do we do if someone's voice isn't heard? How can we make sure that we are using our Unitarian Universalist thinking minds and loving hearts when we are involved in difficult conversations? I wonder what our ER emotional resiliency plush pals would tell us to do. Thoughtful Turtle would say to slow down and carefully consider each thought you are having and decide which ones are worth sharing. How can you project your voice loud and clear? Slow and steady. If someone expresses an opinion that's different from yours, Respectful Rabbit might say, how should we handle this story in a way that respects each person? Is your voice being respected? Are you respecting the voice of everyone else? I hope so. But what if there are voices that are being hurtful or disrespectful? Sometimes being respectful requires us to use our courageously loving heart. If we find ourselves in a stressful situation like that, Breathing Bear would start by saying, don't forget to take 3 deep breaths. Oxygen helps us when we are stressed, and awakens our thinking minds. Empathy Elephant would invite us to wonder, how might it feel to be each person in this story? How does it feel to be the people who have similar voices sharing similar messages? How does it feel to be the one person speaking up with a different message? And how does it feel to be a person that no one is listening to? How does it feel to be you in this particular story? Parenting Penguin would waddle in to ask, can you freeze the story to find out if you or someone else needs some parental care? Does anyone need help to have their voice listened to and honored? Can you help them, or can you ask someone else to help them be respected? Caring Chipmunk might add, how can we use our voices to make sure that everyone's basic needs are being taken care of? Is there anyone that is being ignored or hurt? Can we speak up to get them help? Generous Giraffe would agree and ask, is there a way we feel safe stretching ourselves to make sure that everyone in the story has their needs met? We want to honor each person. And we want to honor each voice as long as it's not hurting someone else. And Loving Lion might roar, this work of being courageously loving isn't easy, because sometimes we have to be strong and speak up for someone who is being hurt or bullied or disrespected in another way. But don't forget that you aren't alone doing this work. You have pals here at First Parish to help you do hard work like this. Together, we can use our Unitarian Universalist thinking minds and loving hearts to let everyone in the story know that they are cared for and loved, including each one of us. And to remind us that after all this hard work comes the day where everyone is feeling good and we can celebrate. Yay!
It is now time to share with one another our joys and concerns from the past week. These joys and concerns were submitted to me at internminister@uuneedham.org by the Thursday before the service at midnight. If you did not submit a candle but would like to share with the community this morning, you are invited to enter your message into the chat box. As our service is live streamed to YouTube, we cannot guarantee that your joys, concerns, sorrows, or milestones will stay within the First Parish community, but you are always welcome to reach out to Reverend Katie, myself, or the Pastoral Care Associate of the Week, whose name is included in your emailed order of service, for pastoral care or to share more privately. If you're missing hearing each other's voices during this beloved ritual, may this also serve as a reminder to reach out to one another after the service. May this beloved community be sustained by your creativity and care for each other during this time. Our first candle this morning is a candle of concern and healing for Barbara Ridge. Barbara is at Brigham and Women's Hospital having some tests done after severe nausea earlier in the week. Barbara's family asks that you all keep her in your prayers this week, sending her positive energy for a smooth recovery. Our next candle is a candle of concern from Suzanne Pelton. My son-in-law, Peter Nichols, was diagnosed with brain cancer last year, and his condition now is such that the only thing we can do is pray for him. So please keep Peter, my daughter Leslie, and my grandchildren Aiden, Ella Suzanne, and Isa in your prayers. Our next candle is a mixed candle from the Taylors. Kay and Clark Taylor's granddaughter Emily is presently hospitalized, and they hope that she will be coming home soon. Our next candle is a candle of concern and love from Tom Pugh and Sandra Riscala. Tom and Sandra are both ill with COVID, managing their symptoms together at home. According to Tom, thanks to the generosity and love of friends, we have rivers of soup and plenty of help. Watching the inauguration on Wednesday was also medicinal. We are so grateful for all of your caring support. Our next candle is a candle of joy from Judy Hadrick. My granddaughter Emma has just been accepted at Tulane University, her first choice. She will begin her freshman year there in the fall, and we are all so proud of her. And our last candle this morning is a candle of joy from Vin and Becky Kennedy. A candle of joy and anticipation for our newest family member, Wyatt, born to daughter-in-law Lizzie and son Peter on November 5th, the same day his cousin Ansel turned 3. Like so many, we have not shared space and hugs with our families in over a year. We're really restless in anticipation to meet Wyatt and be all together. For all the joys and sorrows that we still hold in our hearts, and in acknowledging the prayers of our neighbors near and far, we light a final candle. May the peace in this sanctuary be felt too in each of your homes, as we remember that even though apart, we are still deeply connected. Amen. Let us join together now in prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love, God of many names, we rejoice with all of you who come today in joy. We celebrate all of the glass ceilings that shattered as the U.S. swore in its first woman and first Black and South Asian American to the vice presidency. We celebrate that Pennsylvania Health Secretary Rachel Levine has been confirmed as the new Assistant Secretary of Health, which makes her poised to become the first openly transgender federal official to be confirmed by the Senate. And we celebrate the U.S.'s rejoining of the Paris Climate Accord, the World Health Organization, and the reinstitution of DACA. We celebrate the end of the travel ban on majority Muslim countries and the 1776 Commission. With a lot of work still to do, we take a moment to pause and celebrate steps in the right direction, to ensure that generations beyond us will have a livable planet and that the inherent worth and dignity of all people will be better enacted in laws and policies here in the U.S. Our hearts are also with those who come today with a sorrow or a fear, or in tiredness or weariness. Our prayers are with those Hondurans who are facing violent resistance in Guatemala as they head north to Mexico and the U.S. border. Our prayers are for the conditions they're facing along their journey and the dehumanizing situation in Honduras that is forcing them to flee. And we grieve that the U.S. has surpassed 400,000 lives lost to the COVID-19 pandemic. We take a moment for all those who have lost a loved one to this pandemic, and for all those areas and communities that were and continue to be the hardest hit. May we look to this loving community for resilience and hope when our own is in short supply. May we hold each other from a distance in the places that are the most tender this week. And may we remember that even though physically distanced, we are still deeply connected. May it be so. And amen. And please join us now in singing from home our meditative hymn this morning, Gathered Here. The lyrics and music will appear on your screens. This congregation has been supported by the volunteered time and treasure of its members and friends since its founding in 1711. This is the time in our service when we, the modern stewards of this church, offer what we can to build and sustain the congregation and the world that we envision. This month, our collections will be split 50-50 with Canasta Solidaria, Solidarity Basket. In response to the pandemic, the Metro West Worker Center and the Metro West Immigrant Solidarity Network began Canasta Solidaria to offer culturally appropriate groceries and grocery gift cards to struggling immigrant families, many of whom do not have access to other sorts of support because of their immigration status. Each week, Canasta Solidaria assists hundreds of families in both Framingham and Milford, which requires over $10,000 a week to sustain. As a Level 2 sanctuary supporting congregation, we are proud to support Canasta Solidaria. To donate to today's offering, you can use one of 3 different methods. You can use our Text to Give program through the number 73256 with the exact wording of UU Needham space plate or Pledge 21 space $, and the amount that you would like to give. You can mail a check to First Parish at 23 Dedham Avenue, or you can make a donation through our website, uuneedham.org, and select Donate Now under the Giving box. Whichever way, remember to specify whether your donation is meant for the plate collection or for your annual pledge. Thank you for everything you are able to give to help support and sustain our congregation and the vital work of our community partners. Please take these next few moments to give what you can and know that it will be gratefully received. Our reading this morning comes from a book by Euro-American author and education reformer Parker Palmer called Healing the Heart of Democracy: The Courage to Create a Politics Worthy of the Human Spirit. In March 2011, I participated in the 3-day Congressional Civil Rights Pilgrimage sponsored by the Faith and Politics Institute in Washington, D.C., and led by Congressman John Lewis. The pilgrimage began in Birmingham, Alabama, moved on to Montgomery, and ended in Selma, where we marked the 46th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, a pivotal event in American political history. On Sunday, March 7th, 1965, 600 nonviolent protesters, many of them young, gathered at the foot of Selma's Edmund Pettus Bridge to begin a 50-mile march to the Alabama state capitol in Montgomery, a protest against the ongoing exclusion of African Americans from the electoral process. When they reached the other side of the bridge, the marchers were brutalized by state and local police, mounted and on foot, with billy clubs and tear gas. This atrocity, witnessed on television by millions of Americans, scandalized the nation. It also generated enough political momentum in Congress that President Lyndon Johnson was able to sign a Voting Rights Act into law just 5 months after the march. The 1965 march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge was led by John Lewis, then only 25 years old, and chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. As leader, he was one of the first to be beaten by the police, who fractured his skull and left marks that he bears to this day. It left another kind of mark on me in March 2011 to follow the then 71-year-old John Lewis across the bridge where 46 years earlier he had led others in a courageous exercise of people power. During the 3 days of the Civil Rights Pilgrimage, I was reminded time and again of themes that are key to this book. The centrality of the habits of the heart that we develop in the local venues of our lives. The patience that it takes to stay engaged in small, often invisible ways with the American experiment in democracy. The importance of faithfully holding the tension between what is and what might be, and creating the kind of tension that might arouse the better angels of our nature. The 25-year-old John Lewis and his age mates in the civil rights movement were the descendants of generations of people who had suffered the worst that America has to offer, but had not given up on the vision of freedom, justice, and equality that represents this country at its best. Those people nurtured that vision in their children and grandchildren at home, in the neighborhood, in classrooms, and especially in churches, creating a steady, multi-generational stream of underground activity that was largely invisible to white Americans until it rose up to claim our attention in the 1950s and 1960s. Through study, practice, and prayer, civil rights activists had prepared for action in places like these. And when those actions brought the wrath of politicians and police down on their heads, the activists returned to these places to heal, to regroup, and to act again. Here ends our reading. One of my New Year's resolutions this year was to send in my sermon blurbs earlier. So pleased with myself, on January 4th at 11:39 a.m., knowing that this Sunday would be the Sunday after Inauguration Day, I sent in my sermon blurb for a service titled Politics Worthy of the Human Spirit, feeling hopeful about the dawn of a new day with a president who would at the very least respect the office and commit himself to telling the truth. And then, 48 hours later, a group of extremists, egged on by our outgoing president, violently attacked the US Capitol. And I was really wishing I had waited until the last minute, which would have been January 9th, to reveal what I would preach about and resolve to never make a New Year's resolution ever again. It had been a few years since I had read Healing the Heart of Democracy. I knew that it was solid, but would it have any insights on how to heal a democracy so tattered, so violated, that it no longer resembled what I thought democracy was supposed to look like at all? I knew one of the book's charges was about unity and respecting otherness, and yet as Reverend Katie reminded us so powerfully last week, quoting Euro-American author Rebecca Solnit, the ethical is not halfway between white supremacists and human rights activists, rapists and feminists, synagogue massacrists and Jews, xenophobes and immigrants, delusional transphobes and trans people. Who the heck wants unity with Nazis until and unless they stop being Nazis? I soldiered on in my research, and I was reminded of something that I had forgotten about this book, that Palmer calls his strategy politics of the brokenhearted, and that he wrote this book on the other side of a deep depression. He writes, "When things we care about fall apart, heartbreak happens. There are times when the heart, like the canary in the coal mine, breathes in the world's toxicity and just begins to die." So what Palmer recognizes in this hymn of love to the American democratic experiment is what we heard Martin Luther King Jr. talk about last week on King Sunday, a certain hope in spite of hope, a hope that Palmer might say is on the other side of heartbreak or outrage or despair. So why talk politics in church at all? Can we do that while still honoring the separation of church and state? By way of an answer, Palmer writes, "There are some human experiences that only the heart can comprehend and only heart talk can convey. Among them are certain aspects of politics, and by which I mean the essential and eternal human effort to craft the common life on which we all depend. Looking at politics through the eye of the heart can liberate us from seeing it as a chess game of moves and counter-moves, or a shell game for seizing power, or a blame game of whack-a-mole. Rightly understood, politics is no game at all. It is the ancient and honorable human endeavor of creating a community in which the weak as well as the strong can flourish, in which love and power can collaborate, and justice and mercy can have their day." Before we talk about the ways to look at politics through the eye of the heart, we have to be clear about one more part of the text. Palmer provocatively wants to reframe the Great Divide in American democracy altogether. To him, the greatest divide is not between the left and the right, but it's instead between two other related factors. There are people who, quote, believe that power comes only from possessing or having access to social status, wealth, positional leadership, and the capacity to command institutional resources. Versus, on the other hand, people who believe in the power of ideas, values, commitments, and vision, aka the power of the human heart. And relatedly, on the same side, people who believe that ordinary people, alone or together, are fundamentally powerless in a society dominated by mass institutions. Versus, on this side, those with a more measured view that sure, since citizens united in the power of big money, there are barriers to the power of individual voice, but that those barriers are not wholly insurmountable. When I was reading this chapter earlier this week, I appraised my own situation. I had to admit that I have recently been drifting into dangerous territory about whether really the power of one or the power of ideas and values in the face of lobbies, resources, money, and quite honestly, fear for so many of losing those things that white privilege extends to white bodies, would ever really succeed. But there are 5 habits of the heart, according to Palmer, that can help move someone like me across his great divide, from political hopelessness on one end to political efficacy on the other. Those habits include, First, an understanding that we are all in this together. Second, developing an appreciation of the value of otherness. Third, cultivating the ability to hold tension in life-giving ways. Fourth, generating a sense of personal voice and agency. And fifth, strengthening our capacity to create community. He goes on to say that through language, art, religion, and education, we can become continuously better practiced in these heart habits that are central to the health of our democracy. And I am struck by how closely this list parallels our 7, soon-to-be 8 principles. Our 7th UU principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, speaks directly to that first heart habit, an understanding that we are all in this together. Some combination of our commitment to justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships, combined with our acceptance of one another in our congregations, helps us, I think, to develop an appreciation of the value of otherness. Our ongoing free and responsible searches for truth and meaning help me, at least, practice holding tension in life-giving ways. In an open search, there are always contradictions, and to be committed to the never-ending search means holding those contradictions in a way that gives life, not stifles it. And our commitment to the inherent worth and dignity of everyone, including ourselves, helps us over time step into voice and agency. And finally, all that we do in church together helps to strengthen our capacity to create community. It becomes clearer why these habits of the heart are essential once we get on the same page about what democracy is and what democracy isn't. Palmer writes, wanting to improve on the repressive governments of old Europe, America's founders needed to create political structures that were strong enough to hold the tension, there's that language again, tension, of divergent problems. The democratic institutions they invented were designed to function like a loom, holding the tension of our political disagreements and giving us chance after chance to reweave the fabric of our common civic life. Now, there are certain things in our history that our founders could not have anticipated, loopholes to the true democratic process or outright violations of it. When one branch finds a way to circumvent the checks and jurisdictions of another, when lobbies gain so much power that they obscure the real needs of the body politic, when a free and fair election is challenged as illegitimate, when an executive has pride big enough to get in the way of him upholding his oath to the country. This is all to say that at this threshold, our democracy has been tried and it has been weakened. But the problem does not lie with the democratic process itself. It lies with the forces that have weakened it. And we should take care not to confuse the two. Authoritarianism is a direct threat to democracy, not a dissenting opinion that will help us to reweave the fabric of our common life. And so, looking at the last month and the last 4 years with as much honesty as we can muster, I find 2 reasons to be hopeful. The first is in our own potential, each one of us as Unitarian Universalists well practiced in those heart habits, to, in the words of Marge Percy, to care, to act, and to do it again. And the second reason I have to be hopeful is that I trust, under this new administration, more than the question of which agenda is going to be advanced, either blue or red, that the conditions that have weakened the loom of democracy that led to the deadly attack on the Capitol will be slowly rooted out over time. In his sermon after the insurrection, Euro-American UU minister Reverend Tom Goldsmith spoke about how a growing body of research says that conspiracy theories find a natural increase in times of instability and uncertainty, whereas with more political and economic security, conspiracy theories lose their power. With the banning of a certain Twitter account, the spread of misinformation has already slowed dramatically, reports say. One need only look at the New York Times publication of the 598 people, places, and things Donald Trump has insulted on Twitter to feel a sense of relief that he will no longer be able to publicly call things fake news 387 times or a witch hunt 170 times. Fake news was particularly an interesting one. An insult used predictably toward CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, The Washington Post, Comcast, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, the Democrats, and an occasional unlucky Fox reporter like John Roberts, but also, fascinatingly, toward election pollsters and Joe Biden, the person. I don't think it was just random that Biden repeated his presidential oath at the end of his inaugural speech on Wednesday, that his closing words weren't about freedom or unity or fighting the pandemic, but just the simple reminder that he will defend the U.S. Constitution, which is the document at the center of our democracy. There is one last thing we need to be clear about when we talk about healing the heart of democracy. Having faith in the democratic process itself, when properly functioning, is not the same thing as saying that the America of 4 years ago ever in practice embodied our highest ideals. Just like it's easy to conflate the forces that weaken democracy with democracy itself, it's easy to conflate the democratic process with US history. Black doula activist and writer Adrienne Marie Brown writes, "I claim no easy victory, as Amilcar Cabral, the Cape Verdean revolutionary, puts it. I know we are up against the ruling structures of a system, of a nation that has never loved us. This is just history unfolding, a pendulum swinging back and forth along prescribed lines. We must find a way out of those lines if our nation plans to outlive the Confederacy, and if, because racialized fascism is a growing global threat, our species hopes to outlive the Nazis. But we are finding our way. From the Capitol in DC to the streets wherever we live, this old shell is bursting at the seams, and the new worlds we are building are the true pressure." End quote. Democracy, since its inception, has been all about keeping the creative tension of divergent problems alive in us, about not rushing to easy answers, about the endless debate. In theory, it is allowing for that endless creative tension, perhaps on par with, or even more so than the golden rule of democracy, one person, one vote, that keeps us ordinary citizens involved and actively reconstituting the thing as it happens. Sometimes that creative tension involves, to use Brown's imagery, a pendulum swinging back and forth along a short string, one step forward and one step back. Sometimes a bigger pendulum along a longer string, so 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. But what this moment requires is the moral, political imagination to question if the ends of the pendulum are important to or arbitrary to democracy altogether. And how do we do this? First, read this book. Create book groups, share it with friends and loved ones, and supplement Palmer's opinion with the growing body of research, memoir, and literature from people of color about the needed cultural and policy fights that start this week. Keep working on the heart habits, remembering that we are all in this together, valuing otherness, holding tensions in life-giving ways, using your voice and agency, and building and strengthening communities. And I would add to this list, holding people accountable for acts that perpetuate oppression or injustice. Get on some politically involved faith-based newsletters. Know what's happening with UU The Vote or Black Lives of UU, and attend a training, check out their resources. Because ultimately, I believe in democracy. I believe in our fifth UU principle. But I don't believe in or cast my lot with the forces that have come on the scene to weaken or violate democracy, or that fall anywhere short of our first or eighth UU principle. And I no longer believe in the democracy of the pendulum, but I believe that as part of our ability to reweave the fabric of civic life, that we can challenge the two poles of that pendulum, that we can challenge the arbitrary lines that have been drawn within which we've been allowed to play. And that through Palmer's heart habits, be a part of demanding politics that are truly worthy of the human spirit. May it be so, and may we make it so. Amen.
I'm gonna tell you, fascists, you may be surprised that people in this world are getting organized. You're bound to lose. You're fascist bound to lose.
Race hatred cannot stop us. This one thing we know. Your stars and bars and southern pride has got to go. You're bound to lose. You fascist bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose.
Yes, sir.
All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose.
People of every color
Marching side by
As we close our worship today, you are all invited to stay with us for our Zoom social hour. Please remember to keep a careful eye out for emails from First Parish and follow us on social media so you can keep up with opportunities for connection for all ages throughout the week during these times of physical isolation. You can sign up for our weekly email by clicking on Subscribe to Newsletter on our website, uuneedham.org. Please remember, if you fall ill or need any pastoral support, to reach out to our ministers, Reverend Katie Scudera and Jenna Crawford, and the pastoral care team and caring crew via phone or email. We also encourage all of you strongly to check in with your friends at First Parish and to double-check your own contact information in our online Realm directory if you have not done so recently. Please email our office administrator, Susanna Whitman, if you have any questions about using our online directory. We always extinguish our chalice with words promising to carry its flame in our hearts until we are together again, no matter how long it is, until we are together again. As we extinguish our chalice today, please join me from home in saying these words written by Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Elizabeth Selly Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Hymn number 1014, Answering the Call of Love, was written and composed by Unitarian Universalist music director and composer Reverend Jason Shelton. Shelton was inspired by a marriage equality statement issued by former UUA President Bill Sinkford, who coined the phrase, "We stand on the side of love." A number of years ago, Reverend Shelton updated the ableist language of the hymn from standing on the side of love to answering the call of love. Please join us in singing from home, hymn number 1014, Answering the Call of Love.
Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are
The words for our benediction this morning come from Black National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman. This is from her inauguration poem on Wednesday called "The Hill We Climb." We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. For the new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. The service begins when the service ends. Go in peace.